back to another episode of my talk show series, where I mentioned earlier that I would invite good guests to talk about different topics and issues. So today I've invited Sister Shahista Thokan. So let's welcome her.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, Sister Shahista Thokan. How are you doing today?
Alhamdulillah. How are you,
Alhamdulillah.
Kiran?
Alhamdulillah. Thanks a lot for joining. It's a pleasure to have you.
I'm so thrilled that you asked me. I'm so humbled. Thank you so much.
Okay, so guys, just let me a little bit, intro about Shahista Thokan, that she is a transformational coach at Silver Lining Workshop, facilitation and transformational coaching. Yes, Shahista Thokan. My first question would to you about, what are the issues affecting the youth finding in general? What would you say about that?
Look, it's such a broad topic that we can discuss today because there are so many pertinent topics that the youth are getting affected by currently. But I think one of the main things is the pressure that is placed on them to conform, especially the pressure that is placed now via social media. I think you'll agree with me, everything has moved virtually since COVID. So children are more on technology than ever. And what's been happening this time is they exposed so much to just the small part of life that is what technology and social media is. And that type of pressure is being placed on them in society to be a certain way, to look a certain way, to act a certain way, to have certain things. So I think the youth right now are quite influenced by what is in their direct surroundings and environment.
Okay, so suppose patient would come in, maybe the youth we're talking about. So what does transformational coach do in regards to, solve their problems?
So a lot of the times parents bring their children to me because they are suffering from anxiety or stress. And a lot of those type of pressures are either academic or it could be a relationship based, like peer pressure or bullying. So as a transformational coach, what I do is I actually interact with the child on their level. Because of my many years as a teacher, as a counselor, I am able to connect with them and ask them the right type of questions to get to the root of the problem. That's what's affecting them. And most of the time, I think parents are misdiagnosing anxiety in children as just a basic mishandling of how they communicate or a behavioral pattern that has changed, something as minor as a situation like not being able to, cope with their time or study skills. That stresses them out, and then parents give it the word of anxiety and make it a very much more deeper mental condition.
Of course. Okay, so I've also find about, your youth workshop, and I've heard you are just going to maybe classify that in different topics for that workshop. So I would like to know about those topics. How do you, just take it along the way you're just carrying it as a workshop tool?
So what I do is I work with a target market in specific age categories. For example, you'll see it's divided into 6 to 9-year-olds and then 10 to 14-year-olds and so on and so forth. And it could go up to tertiary level education because that's my specialist field. I'm a tertiary level educator. And what I decide in those groups is what are the pertinent issues affecting that age group of children. So where 6 to 9-year-old would have a situation of bullying, the teenagers would then have a situation of peer pressure and confidence building, self-esteem issues. So I really do my research as to what's required right now in the market. So when I previously held the workshop in youth development, I was specifically asked for confidence building in children, public speaking in children, because of their lack of interaction, the lack of the social element now because of being mostly surrounded by technology and at home, remote working and so on with the current situation in the country. What I found is they were craving, how do we go back into relationships and socializing and groups, and how do we do teamwork and, forget that shutting off from the world and hiding behind a screen type of attitude. And I think those development workshops really worked well because the children were able to do activities and really express themselves and ask questions to each other, and see that, you know, in their age categories, what they're going through is really quite normal. It's everyone going through the same thing and they're not isolated. And that's very important, because when we tend to isolate ourselves and think that we are going through something uniquely, is when we get anxious and depressed, and when we get worried and stressed out, because you almost internalize every emotion to yourself.
Right. Okay. So what you just mentioned about, like, you mentioned earlier, but now classifying about the ages, the groups you're taking. So from which ages you're taking, and which way you are just classifying the groups?
So in the schooling system, they aged according to phases. So it's growth phases mentally as well as physically and emotionally, right? So when we talk about 6 to 9 year olds, we are talking about maybe the junior phase. And then we move on to an intermediate phase, which are adolescents. And then we go on to a senior phase where they're more developed into becoming more mature. And then, of course, adulthood. So those different phases, the children's psyche and psychologically, their relationships, their experiences are limited to those age groups. So that's how I classify my clients as well in terms of the NLP coaching, because how you would speak to a teenager, you can't necessarily speak to a younger person, and so on. So with play therapy, with the younger kids, it works much better. So we do activities that are very hands-on, very activity based, where we are using materials and distractions, sometimes toys and environments. Whereas a teenager, you can take them for a milkshake and have a coaching session like that. They open up more easily. And then, you approach it in such a different way as to get the child to speak to you and trust you in a different way. And that's where communication starts.
Right. Okay. In regards to those patients, suppose, like, they are having some mental and emotional issues. So what could be the, wellness tools for them you would just recommend? And, like, if you're taking
So
the workshop.
yes, each situation obviously would be unique, and it's not a one cap fits all type of scenario. However, the underlying conditions which I have noticed is a lot of the pressure that's placed from the home environment. Sometimes it's directly from the parents themselves. So you teach children, but then you also recognize what their love language is, how their parents can better understand them as what they uniquely need from a parent. Remember, like I'll tell you, as a parent myself, I've got 4 sons, and each one is a very different personality. So dealing with
Yes.
them would be very different. And that's what I try to teach the parents of my children that I coach is I understand the child, and then I communicate that to the parent and say, look, your child needs this approach. So with regards to tools, coming back to the anxiety, I teach them very simple things like how to relieve their stress, how to manage their time better, how to plan themselves. Do they have too much on their plate? Sometimes we just overwhelm our children with extra murals and so on. So we ourselves are burdening them with unnecessary things, trying to get them to have a full education out of school even. And so the tools would start off with recognizing what's troubling the child, fixing the environment in which the child is, understanding the time, the scheduling, allowing time for play, allowing time for relaxation, allowing time for screen, allowing time for sport and socializing. So dividing and balancing that child's life is ideal for anxiety to be relieved and released. And remember, it's not something that's incurable. And on an ongoing basis, stress will come and go. It's how we deal with our stress. And then the second element that I recognized is dietary with our children. A lot of our kids are not getting the proper supplementation from their food. And we
Okay.
are overcompensating then
Yes.
with other types of things like vitamins. But that doesn't help because correcting their diet affects their behavior directly. Until the age of 18, most of their behavioral and mental and emotional instabilities come from their relationships with various factors. And one of them is food and nutrition and building their brain and feeding them the right, correct type of things that will calm them and bring them into a state of happiness and with who they are in terms of their growth development as well. So yeah, those are the type of things that we discuss.
Okay, so maybe my last question or second last question would be in regards to, like, suppose as being transformational coach, do you also deal with narcissistic personality patient? Did they ever, like, come to you and you sort it out, and did you find it difficult for them to just, deal with it, or they are also like easygoing to just counsel nicely?
As a transformational coach who studied NLP techniques, I don't think we are qualified enough to deal with a disorder per se. So any type of disorder, whether it's bipolar or narcissism, they usually get referred to psychologists and psychiatrists because it's a much deeper rooted element of psychology and emotion and mental illness. It's actually an illness that you deal with because it's a personality disorder eventually.
Right.
So when I am exposed to it, I'm only exposed to it as a marriage counselor, and then we get the individual the assistance they need. When it comes to people resisting coaching and resisting, the type of possible wellness techniques, because we are not allowed to give advice as coaches, what we do is we just give perspective. We give results driven and goal driven techniques, which may work for some and may not work for others. So people have to really be open minded to their own journeys, their own growth, and take advice in terms of being referred to the proper healthcare, mental health professionals that can take it further if they have been diagnosed with certain elements. A lot of the time, as I said, people self-diagnose, even with ADHD and depression. It may not be as severe as that, but we want to put a name to it. And oftentimes we treat something that doesn't really exist. So as a coach, if that happens, and if I see that, look, this is beyond my scope, then we do refer, because remember, we are in a situation of amana where our conscience is, we are taking someone's life, we are taking
Yes,
someone's trust and someone's
yes,
confidence in us to help them. And
of
as
course.
counselors, we cannot do more than we can do, and we do not know everything, and we need to acknowledge that and then use the system and give the correct guidance to these type of people to go further in their journeys.
Okay, coming back about your workshop process. So are they still on, or they'll be starting next month? So, like, what is the procedure?
So I have monthly workshops. I usually get invited either by corporate, or I decide to host workshops in certain areas. For example, this weekend I'm going to Cape Town and I'm doing a grief and healing workshop. A lot of people have suffered with loss, with demotivation, unhappiness, and sadness during the time of COVID. And what I'm doing is I'm hosting a workshop to uplift, to inspire them to find their purpose again. Lots of activities. I have some guest speakers that I'm having in Cape Town, just to get them back on their feet, back to living and thriving in a situation where they've lost hope almost. And my workshops are fully advertised on social media, and I do different topics for different phases of the year. Like some may be now with currently with COVID, it's healing, but normally it would be empowerment or skills based, like learning how to deal with conflict or team building for corporate employees. So it can vary and differ across the board. Alhamdulillah, over the years, I've gathered a lot of knowledge and information. I've studied a lot, and I use those elements to conduct my workshops and the topics that I choose.
Okay, so did you also notice, like, after COVID-19, did you see a lot of patients coming, suffering with, a lot of anxiety and mental pressure? Did you see more, like,
Yes.
Okay.
So one of, I think, the key elements of it was not only the illness itself, but the ripple effect on and the repercussion on other areas of their lives, like financially. A lot of people have taken strain on the financial aspect of COVID. Be it unemployment, remote working, where the hours have been cut to work. Remember, sometimes people go to work to escape the home. A lot of times children go to school to escape the home environment. It's a release. It's a break away from the same old, isolated environment. So those type of aspects where mentally they've now become anxious of staying in the same environment for the same amount, for a long period of time. That has affected them because they go into a dark space where they don't have an outlet anymore to release their anxiety, to get that social freedom, to feel like they have a purpose going to work. People have struggled with loss of income in their homes where they can't provide anymore or live the type of life they were once living. So all these type of things have affected people's personalities and behavior on a large scale, because it's almost like, how do you build a resilience to something that has hit you in such a hard way? And different people have been affected in different ways. So some people, alhamdulillah, have not been affected at all. So from an onset, when you are comparing and looking, I mean, that also brings a great deal of sadness to a person, to say that my life has been so deeply affected by loss, whether it was loss of income, loss of people, loss of loved one, whatever it was, and others have not yet to feel the pandemic. So I think those type of scenarios do create a lot of chaos in our lives.
All right. So now, how can people get hold of you? Would you just like to mention your contact details and maybe your Instagram handles?
Firstly, thank you, Kiran. You've been amazing. I think I've been watching your YouTube videos. What you're doing is really phenomenal. And I think it's so important that you are leaving this legacy behind of what topics you are covering and how it can help people. So with me personally, I am a business coach as well as a transformational coach. I'm an educator first. I do a lot of youth, a lot of adult and marriage counseling. My contact number is 072-565-1265. That's obviously in South Africa. And then my Instagram handle is Shahista Thokan. So it's at Shahista Thokan, ShahistaThokan. And through those two channels, we can get into direct contact. And now with social media making things so easy, we do virtual consults. I'm on Zoom. I do online coaching. I do a lot of interactive workshops now that it's opened up to level 1, alhamdulillah. So we're back to getting a bit of normality. So people can really reach out if they have questions or queries. I'm readily and available to help.
Thanks a lot. That's perfect. And I'm also going to mention the whole detail in the description. So people would just love to know about you and definitely will just, get contacting with you. So thanks a lot. I'm going to end this session. Inshallah, I'm just going to invite you next time, maybe in any other episode, maybe with some related different topics. And thanks a lot for coming. Salam.
Pleasure, and anytime. Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you so much.